Hello and welcome to the show. Today we are tackling a tough subject, generational curses. An unknown author wrote, "Pain moves through families until someone is ready to feel it and then heal it." And my guests today say there is no truer statement when it comes to family and healing from issues of the past. Please welcome back to the show, Speech and Yolanda Thomas. Hello.
Thank you so
Hey
much.
again.
Thank you.
Always love having
Always love
you
coming to
here.
your show. Thank you.
Good to see you.
Yes, indeed. And let me just say this. Thank you, because we're going to talk about family business.
Yeah.
But that's how we learn.
Facts.
And that's how we heal. So I
Facts.
appreciate in advance
Thank
the
you.
candor when we talk about it. And you
Yes.
have been on the show in the past talking about very candid issues. So
Yeah.
that's why we wanted to lean back into you for this conversation. First of all, let's talk, though, about generational curses. What does that mean to you when we hear that concept?
Sure. Well, I mean, it comes from numerous places. It could be from a religious source, but the way we're sort of addressing it today is basically toxic behaviors that are being passed down generation to generation. So that's what it is basically.
And that can be anything, the actions, how we talk to people,
Sure,
some
it
of
could
the
be anything,
behavior
yes.
that we see, addictions. It's any
Addictions,
number
it
of
could be how your
violence.
family dynamic is,
Yeah.
how your relationship dynamic is, what your dynamic is with yourself, how you view yourself, your inner thoughts. All of these things are sort of all encompassing with what generational curses can be. Yeah.
Yeah. And Yolanda, that's the same for you too, right?
Same for me. It's more about, just bad eating habits, being overweight. So those are the generational curses that I've
Personally been committed to.
Oh, definitely. And
Yeah.
for me, if you wanted to know,
Yes, for sure.
the men in my family, infidelity. And that was something that I needed to break as far as that curse, because I didn't have examples of a marriage with faithfulness. And so I needed to try to understand it and learn it. And, I guess we'll talk about sort of what you could do to combat these things. But that was
Made
what I
some
had
mistakes,
to,
learned
without
from
a
the
question.
mistakes,
Yeah,
healed,
definitely.
and kept moving. And still here we are together.
Yeah.
Almost 30 years?
Almost 30.
Almost
Love
30
it.
years.
Let's
yeah.
talk about, let's just tell me a little bit more just about growing up, where you were from and how
Sure.
that shaped, what you saw in your family, in your community, in Milwaukee.
Yeah, I grew up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. My family is powerful men, fantastic men, hardworking men. But unfortunately, within that dynamic, and I think there's a lot of reasons for this, and it comes from generational curses, even from back in slavery, where men were expected to be with multiple partners, and that added value to them if they were with multiple partners, and if they procreated with these partners. So these things come back for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
But with my father, my grandfather, powerful men did not understand how to really constitute a faithful relationship. Had relationships, were both married, but did not know how to stay faithful. I did not have examples from them in that regard, and that was one of the family curses that I had to deal with.
I have to point out, we're looking at this beautiful
Yes.
family photo. Just tell
Yes.
us about the beautiful women in
5
these pictures.
generations of
And that
women right
baby.
there.
Okay.
Yes, the little baby is me.
That's
My Aunt Alice is holding me. She's the oldest of them. My mother is right next to her, gorgeous mother, my mother
Beautiful.
Patricia. And then her mother was right next to her in the white. My brother, Terry Thomas, is the little boy next to me, and he's 7 years older than me. And then my grandmother, Obira, is right there. So all of them, 5 generations of women in my family.
So you've watched women go through things.
I've watched women.
And what it looks like when a man hurts.
It is literally emptying their souls, and to see them be betrayed by the person that they love the most, right? And in their generations, they persevered through that. We now have the freedoms to be able to understand if we choose to persevere through it and stay in that relationship, or if we choose to move forward. But in those years, that wasn't, you sort of stayed
Right.
in there no matter what.
Absolutely.
And to some extent in those years, women were expected to do it because it was so common that they just were expected to take the pain of it and sort of almost, expected it was going to happen.
So I want to talk just briefly before we get to these conversations about your mother and your grandfather. This concept of having to recognize, I see what's happening, but I'm going to do something different.
Correct.
How did you finally say, I'm not doing this. I've seen how this hurts my family, how it hurt my mother. I'm not going to do this to my wife anymore.
I think, first of all, it's a matter of having the tools, because I knew consciously and morally that that was not the right thing to do. But having the tools to actually stop it. Now, some people, especially women, because they're built a little differently than men, a lot of women would say, well, just stop it. But for men,
Did you say just stop it?
I did.
without a question. And so for men, a lot of times we need to, number one, unlearn certain things as far as what our values are and what we prioritize in our life,
Right.
and then learn new things and fill it up with valuing our partner in a way where being faithful is the number one priority. And then we don't let it, derail us any longer, but we have to change those thoughts.
And for you, Yolanda, I know you've said in other episodes that it was just about praying and learning and accepting the new man who he's
Exactly.
going to be.
Well, for us, we had to do something totally different. And so studying the Bible and understanding what God wanted from me as a wife and wanted from him as a husband, what our standard was going to be. And that changed everything for us.
I know
really did.
I know something else that changed everything for you. You lost 2 loved ones within 1 week.
Yes.
Let's talk about the impact that has from the standpoint of it being a generational issue to have to deal with. Explain.
Yeah, well, a lot of us have trauma, because that's what that was. My brother, who was in the picture earlier, was 29 years old, 7 years older than me, and he passed of an asthma attack, totally unexpected. The week before that, in fact, the last place I saw him was at my grandmother's funeral. And so trauma is something that families deal with or are living through, but many times don't deal with. They're not
right.
facing
it happens, but nobody talks
Nobody's talking about
how
it.
you're
And
feeling
so-
afterwards.
Exactly. So one of the things that we had to deal with in my family and in our family dynamic was just the trauma of losing, 2 loved ones that close to one another.
Was there therapy at that age? Because I feel like that was the time when we were still like, nah, we don't have the money for that. We don't do that. We got to be at work. We can't
Which
take
is
off
another
time.
generational curse that happens, is this idea, and in many of our households, this idea exists that therapy is like, if you're crazy, quote unquote.
Right.
Right? And so it's something that's looked down upon. So that's another thing that's been passed down generations and generations. So yeah, for us at that time period when it happened, which was in the early 90s, therapy wasn't as big as it is now,
Right.
but needing counseling was definite. And we did do that. And through spiritual means and counselors and people that were spiritually more, in depth than we were at the time.
So you're advocates of therapy.
Without a question. Yes,
Yeah,
therapy,
that's
counseling as well.
one of
These
the
things are
steps.
very important.
One of the many steps that it takes to get to break generational curses,
Yes.
right? Beautiful conversation.
Yeah,
Don't
thank you.
go anywhere. When we return, a lot of you know Arrested Development's music and the video spoke to a lot of the themes of our families, the good and the not so good. We're going to talk more about why that music, how that music helped speech heal when we return. Stay with us.